Good morning, everyone. Well, good morning and good afternoon and good evening to all of you from across the world. I'm sure that you had enjoyed that beautiful and inspiring video of our sisters, women across the world. Just to of course, ask you that I hope that those who need translation have found their language by clicking on the interpretation icon in their Zoom controls. So my name is Julia Grindon Welsh, and I'm based here in New York. And together with our team, we're very pleased to welcome you all to our panel event for the Commission on the Status of Women. A gathering which happens annually at UN headquarters in New York to promote gender equality and the empowerment of women, and also document the reality of women's lives throughout the world, shaping global standards. Today, we welcome those who are part of the NGO CSW Forum. There are many thousands attending, and others from many diverse backgrounds and experiences, including young people. Pre-COVID, there was always a wonderful scene of thousands of women filling New York. The city would become even more vibrant and colorful, and you could feel the power of women as they gathered at the UN and in cafes on the streets, and meeting halls spread throughout Midtown Manhattan. Sadly, for the last couple of years, our meetings have been held online due to COVID. However, this has also afforded us greater participation from around the world in different time zones and brings us here today. We, the Brahma Kumaris, are your hosts, and we're an international non-governmental organization. And as you may know, we are a women-led organization. And so we especially hold the focus of Goal 5 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls very close to our hearts. Today's event will focus on the role of consciousness in transformation, women leading the way. And I'm sure you will agree that we are all at a critical junction of our existence. We only have to look at what is happening in the world to know that the way forward calls for deeper transformation. The climate crisis is one of many that we are facing and cannot be resolved only from technical or political perspectives. It needs a deeper inquiry and shift in the very fabric of our lives. The inner world and the outer world are parts of the same wheel of life. And for the outer state of the world to be transformed, the inner state of our world must first be transformed. We believe that women have a crucial role to play in this, and that together with men can lead the way with integrity, intuitive wisdom, and courage. We started today's program with a video of inspiring women's voices, and we will continue by drawing on our hearts and minds to co-create a space to explore the consciousness we need to move the needle towards deeper transformation. After a short icebreaker, there will be a reflective process which will lead into the conversation with our wonderful panel of women speakers from diverse backgrounds of science, spirituality, international governance, and indigenous wisdom. The conversation will be led by our experienced facilitator, Judy Rogers. And during this conversation, there will be opportunities for questions, followed by a short meditation, and we will end with an offer of a toolkit for those who would like support in this process of transformation. The team that has brought you to this event will introduce themselves as they facilitate different areas of today's program. And so with that, we welcome you all, and I'm sure that we'll all enjoy the process. Thank you.
So I am Marianne. I'm from Costa Rica, and I'm so happy to see all of you. And we want to create an environment of trust and a warm environment. Even if we are in Zoom, if we can turn on the cameras, it will be very beautiful. And if you can put the screen in gallery mode, maybe they can not spotlight me, in order for us to just appreciate all the ones who are here. And you can go through the different screens, pages, and you will see there beautiful people from different parts of the world, because right now we are from India, from Asia till Latin America. So you will see each one, and well, the ones who cannot turn on the camera, we know you're there. So you feel most welcome, please. And now we want to do a little dynamic. We are going to turn off the camera, and I will ask a question. If the answer is affirmative for you, you will turn on the camera, okay? So we are going to turn off the camera right now, and I will ask you first, who has attended CSW before? So only the ones who have been attending CSW, this Conference of Women before, will turn on the camera. Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you. Now we are going to turn off the camera again. And I will ask, who likes chocolate? Who likes chocolate? The ones who likes chocolate will turn on the camera. Okay, I guess many of us. Thank you. Okay, so now we are going to turn off the camera again. And who has practiced meditation before? Who has practiced meditation? So the ones who has practiced will turn on the camera. Okay, many. Okay, wonderful. Okay, we are going to turn off the cameras again. And who have children? Who have children? The ones who have children are going to turn on the camera. Okay, many. Okay, thank you. Now we are going to turn off the camera. And the last question is, who lives in different place from where you were born? Who lived in a different place from where you were born? Okay. Many. Well, almost half. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So now that we know each other a little bit more, not too many two private questions, we are going to continue. And most welcome.
Hello everyone, and very lovely to be together. My name is Pratibha and I'm from South Africa, but right now I'm in India at our headquarters for a retreat. So it's lovely to be with all of you from this wonderful place. Because of CSW and many of you who have been attending, it's the second week, and so there's been a lot of information, a lot of issues that you've been working with and been exposed to right now. And for those who are joining us that haven't been on CSW as well, we feel that before we explore this afternoon's topic on consciousness and transformation, it's really valuable just to take a moment to pause and reflect inwardly, to reconnect with our own personal experience, so that when we engage with our very expert panelists, there's a kind of a reference from our own personal experience as well. So I'm going to invite you to just take a few moments, and on the screen will appear 2 questions, which I'd like you to just take a few moments to just reflect on. Firstly, reflect on a recent experience of inner transformation that has shifted the way you see and work in the world. So reflect on a recent experience of inner transformation that has shifted the way you see and work in the world. So just for a few moments, just return to your inner core of quietness and just see what emerges in your heart when you think of this question. As you reflect, you can either write it for yourself, or you're also welcome to write in the chat if you'd like to share your reflection with others. Moving on to the second question, if you're ready for that. What inner calling am I hearing for myself at this time? What do I feel called to at this time? For myself, in terms of my own internal work and journey, in terms of the work that I'm engaged in terms of how I connect with the world around me. What inner calling am I hearing for myself at this time? Okay, great. So I see there's been some lovely responses in the chat, which I'll try to read out. But if there's any one of you who would love to share briefly for a minute or so, please do raise your hand, and it would be lovely to hear your voice and also to hear your experience. So until we have a hand raised, I'll read a few that have come through the chat. Dr. Nirja Mathu shared, I have turned to meditation and faith in Almighty God for peace, good health, and happiness. Penny, I see your hands raised. Please go ahead and share.
Thank you. My mission, I believe, at this time is to help women have the confidence to be able to speak out and take action into the world. I think for so long women have been internalized and marginalized into silence. And I think spiritual development is fantastic, but without action in the world, we don't become we don't exercise the power that we have. And I feel it's really time that women felt powerful enough to be able to step out and step up and have a voice, and also take actions that would make a difference.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. Yes, I think we do feel it's very timely now for us to not just to raise our voice, but to take action as well. It's great, great. Is there anyone else who would like to share? I see another reflection here. My own attitude has a big impact on how I see the world. I think very often we do connect with that thought that our own inner world has a tremendous impact in the way we respond to our outer world. Serenity, courage, and happiness. Someone else sharing, I've also shifted to meditation and faith in Almighty God for peace of mind. If there's anyone else, it would be nice to hear another voice. It would be great. Please do raise your hand. The inner calling to live a constant state of gratitude. There's one in a different language. I don't know if it's Spanish. If it is, Marianne, would you like to read it out? Priscilla Alvarado has written in Spanish. Would you like to read that? Translate it.
A second. Keep my spiritual path with gratitude every day in order to transmit peace and serenity.
Okay, great. Thank you. Carolyn Fraud. Carolyn, would you like to say it yourself, Carolyn? Okay, hers is, my inner calling is to have patience whilst being connected closely to everything around me, and then knowing when it is my part to act. Okay. To connect with as many people as possible, to share the message that we can all help create powerful and positive change in the world. To live with understanding, without judgment, moving forward without competition, only to be. The humility of being a silent, strong root for the family tree of humanity. So there's many, many beautiful sharings here, and I think what comes through very powerfully is that we all are recognizing in some way or another the need for our own internal connectedness with either higher source, with our deeper voice, with our inner qualities, reconnecting with qualities of humility, courage to listen, and very much that as we center ourselves, that we can begin to make that impact on our outer world. I think very much when we were planning this session, the feeling also really was that it's very timely now for women to really reconnect with this energy that we have within ourselves, this power that we have within ourselves, and really to feel that that connection is what we can express collectively, that can make the shifts that we need, and that it is in our space and our capacity to actually collectively make that difference. So yeah, it's lovely. I'll share one more part that's come through, and then I think we're perhaps ready to move on. When I have the courage to listen to my inner guidance, I am more responsive to others and can have an impact in my work in the world. So please, as you do feel inspired, continue sharing on the chat, and as we all absorb the wisdom of each other, because I think very deeply we do feel that our learning is a co-creative, collective process together. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for participating.
Hello. Yes, again. So now we have the part of listening to our beautiful panel of speakers. We're in conversation with Judy Rogers, who is our facilitator today. And just to introduce Judy to you, some of you may already know her, but Judy has studied Raj Yoga with the Brahma Kumaris over the past 25 years and lives in a retreat center in the Catskill Mountains in New York. She studies consciousness and how the qualities of our awareness affect what we see in the world and how we engage with others. In 2009, she co-authored a book on altruism called Something Beyond Greatness, and she has supported the Brahma Kumaris International Call of the Time dialogues and retreats for leaders since 1998. And by profession, Judy is a communications strategist. So welcome, Judy. I'll now hand over to you to facilitate this conversation.
Thank you, Julia. And hello, friends. It's very nice to be with you. I kind of wish we were together at the UN. I kind of wish we'd gone through security and gotten our badges and gone into a room together, but then we wouldn't all be here. So it's a joy to be with you. So let me introduce our wonderful panelists. These women, they educate, they advocate, and they mediate in some of the world's most challenging areas. We'll hear from them about how they do what they do and the role that consciousness or awareness plays in their success. We'll also ask them about the opportunities for women's leadership at this time. So to start, let me welcome Lisa Rifke. Lisa, are you seeing Lisa? Lisa has 20 years of professional experience working in and on different conflict settings in the United Nations field operations in Afghanistan and South Sudan, in Burundi, Lebanon, Timor-Leste, and at the United Nations headquarters. Lisa joined the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, UNAMA, in February 2019 as Deputy Chief of Political Affairs Service, focusing on understanding and analyzing political dynamics. Her team informs the political and engagement strategies for UNAMA and supports senior leadership offices and outreach. She also works closely with United Nations and other partners on promoting the women, peace, and security agenda, including women's inclusion in peace and political processes. Lisa obtained a Master of Arts degree in Regional Studies, International Law, and Political Science at Rheinische Friedrich Wilhelms Universität in Bonn, Germany. And I think she's finished. She's currently pursuing, and I think just finished, a Master of Advanced Studies Mediation in Peace Processes at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Judy. Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And now we have Spongile Nkosi. Spongile is a co-executive director of the Global Network of People Living with HIV, which is called GNP+, a network for people living with HIV run by people living with HIV. They engage with and support national and regional networks of people living with HIV to ensure that their global work is grounded in local experiences and priorities of people living with HIV. Spongile is an award-winning public health and social justice journalist, an organizational leader, and an advocate for social change. She has worked for Treatment Action Campaign and was the first Black woman to lead a health news agency, Health e-News Service in South Africa. She specializes in strategic movement analysis and building grassroots power, and is an advocate for deeper mass engagement. She holds a master's degree in business and development from the University of Sussex, in which she was a Chevening scholar. Welcome, Spongile.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you very much.
And then Karen O'Brien. Karen O'Brien is a professor in the Department of Sociology and Human Geography at the University of Oslo, Norway. She is also co-founder of cCHANGE, an organization that supports public engagement with transformations to sustainability. Karen's research emphasizes the social and human dimensions of climate change and implications for human security. Her current research focuses on the relationship between climate change adaptation and transformations to sustainability, with an emphasis on the role of creativity, collaboration, empowerment, and narratives. She is particularly interested in the role of beliefs, values, worldviews, and paradigms in generating conscious social change. Karen has been named by Web of Science as one of the world's most influential researchers of the past decade. In 2021, she was co-recipient of the BBVA Foundation's Frontier of Knowledge Award for Climate Change, and she's written too many books for me to list for you. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here.
And Sister Jayanti, BK Jayanti Kirpalani, who we know as Sister Jayanti, is additional administrative head of the Brahma Kumaris. She is also the director of Brahma Kumaris activities in Europe and the Middle East. As a spiritual teacher for over 50 years, she has dedicated her life to self-transformation and to service to humanity. Sister Jayanti is the main representative of the Brahma Kumaris to the UN in Geneva. She's the head of the BK delegation to the UNFCCC COP conferences. She continues to champion the cooperative role of spiritual organizations in creating a just and peaceful world, bringing spiritual principles to the discussion tables of politicians, economists, business leaders, scientists, and nearly every stakeholder of our times. Sister Jayanti sees the erosion of spiritual values as the underlying cause of the crises the world is facing today. So welcome, Sister Jayanti.
And hello, Judy.
So I want you all to get a feeling for these four amazing women. And so I'm going to ask them to share a story. Each of them plays a significant role in the transformation of people and society on big topics such as climate change and women's rights and HIV/AIDS policy. But on this panel, we're exploring the inner shifts that create the outer transformation. So I'd like to invite each one of you that have just introduced yourselves to share a brief, like 2-minute story of a transformation that you helped bring about. And if you would, include the moment in the midst of this greatest challenge and then a moment in the midst of breakthrough. So I thought, let's start with Lisa.
Thank you so much, Judy, again, for this wonderful opportunity to be here today. And I would like to reflect on some of my experiences that I've seen across the years serving in different conflict settings. And I've become increasingly aware that, of course, key for the inner shift is that very self-awareness without which we can't bring about potent change. And we're all capable of changing in one way or the other, our reactions, feelings, our thoughts. But I've come to realize that first and foremost, we must be conscious of our own beliefs and value systems. And most importantly, we must know that our own consciousness is conditioned by the very worldviews we adhere to. So the real challenge is to lead transformational processes that help others learn, grow, develop, and to help them become transformative leaders in their respective communities and organizations. And this requires vision, empathy, perseverance, and above all, a sense of connectedness. And against this, years ago, when I served in South Sudan, I was greatly inspired by the many beautiful women I met. We worked closely with women leaders who served as part of the national dialogue process. The dialogue aimed to end violence and conflict in South Sudan and support the building of unity and on consensus on how to move the country forward. In this context, I was part of a team that engaged with these women leaders to support their efforts to make the voices of women and men at the grassroots heard. You can imagine that dialogue under such trying conditions is difficult and challenging. So we talked about the power of empathetic, non-judgmental listening, first to ourselves and then to others. We talked about awareness, what we are perceiving and what we are feeling, about respect, compassion, mutual understanding, and trust. And our collective efforts supported the women to engage in numerous grassroots meetings and activities, engaging both men and women, and make their voices heard to contribute to the overall effort of a national dialogue and civic engagement. It was a very powerful experience for me.
This was, when you were telling me about this, it was the herders, the nomadic herders versus farmers in terms of worldview. Was that the essence?
It was really against the conflict that erupted in South Sudan in 2013, and with the peace process continuing for years, engaging in dialogue with ordinary citizens across the country has helped to raise their voices, as a peace process very often focus on the political leadership in a country.
Only those at the top.
The effort was really to make the voices of everyday citizens heard, and to ask the right questions in a challenging context. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Lisa. Okay, Spangili, a story if you would.
So firstly, Judy, I just want to, I just got this feeling that I should actually say in this forum, I'd like to actually honor the erasure of women in transformation stories, particularly when you look at the South African story. I think for a country that has done enormous transformation in terms of politically, socially, and economically, there's so much erasure of the role of women in that transformation. And therefore, today, I just got that feeling to honor them. And I don't know my life without transformation. I grew up in 1994. I was just a young girl. And I remember how, before then, our lives were facing so much displacement, facing so much violence in the country, and so much discrimination and segregation. And then coming into 1994, and there's so much hope that was there. And feeling though that there was still so much displacement that was happening. Yeah. And then growing up to be a teenager, and then finding myself in political movements with my parents where they were actually advocating for transformation, but never understanding why they were advocating for that transformation. And then later on, just finding myself again, but always feeling like there was a displacement, there was a violation, and that I needed to be part of whatever change in especially around women in this country. And therefore, when I began my career as a young journalist, I was particularly drawn into stories around sexual abuse, because sexual abuse was such a big story in this country where women were so violated, and yet that story was not yet told, was not told enough. And only then to realize later on in my own journey that the displacement that I've always felt was a displacement that my great-grandmother felt when she left her home village to pursue a life in the urban areas in a time when there was like apartheid, and in that being sexually abused, in that then giving birth to my grandmother, who then my grandmother later on, I find out that she herself then gets sexually abused, and then she gives birth to my mother. And then my mother in her own journey then gets sexually abused, and just carrying that so much in my body for a longest time and not knowing it. And yet finding myself always wanting to tell those stories through my work as a journalist. And then also then finding myself wanting to work with women to understanding that, so what happens when sexual abuse happens, and how the world actually says it's your fault, and how you must tell the world on how to protect yourself. And then 2016, finding myself sexually abused and contracting HIV. And then that becomes a different understanding of transformation. I think for the longest time for me was I was doing the transformation work from an outsider, but never understanding how that transformation was a personal experience. And therefore in 2016, I remember, 2018, I remember when the first young women sat down in a room and said, we can no longer feel shame around our being sexually abused by the very men that need to protect us. And yet the world is telling us that we should come up with ways of protecting ourselves, And we stood up and we said, we're going to march. We're going to march to the businesses. We're going to march to our leaders. We're going to march and tell the world. And that's what we know in South Africa. And so therefore organizing a women's march I think for me, around gender-based violence, whatever form of violence that as young women were experiencing, as also like a lot of women were experiencing, was to bring about all our great-grandmothers, our grandmothers, whose stories were never told, to say, right now, we need that transformation now. So when that work for me began, and in whatever way I contributed, like organizing the women, organizing the journalists, writing those stories, and then also finding myself becoming a leader of a news agency where I made sure that the role of Black women is actually always highlighted and transformed. So it's so hard to tell the story, but in a nutshell, I think that is my story of transformation.
Oh, that's beautiful, Spongili. I love the generational part of it. And I know this is a theme for you. I want to come back to it because there's a bigger story here, even on the generational piece. But so you turned all of that into real powerful activism. That's beautiful. Thank you. Karen.
Yeah, first, thank you, Lisa and Spongili, for your stories. And my story is about the concept of transformation itself in global change research. And I work on global environmental change. And together with colleagues, we really wanted to get the concept of transformation onto the research agenda and into the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports and global change research programs like Future Earth. And I remember this, when we first introduced this idea of transformation, we got a lot of pushback, like, oh, that sounds very radical. Or, oh gosh, we've been transformed by, for centuries, we don't want to use that word. And a lot of skepticism towards that. And yet working to try to deepen the conversations within science itself and trying to get people to look at those inner dimensions of change and how they relate to the outer dimensions. I think, I was very enthusiastic about that. And when I finally thought I was gaining some traction, some senior scientists were like, yes, Karen is absolutely right. We need to change people's beliefs, values, and worldviews. And then I thought, oh, here we go again, always turning people into objects to be changed by others and always working on the transformations as if they're out there rather than inside us. And so that frustration, I went around a while being frustrated, but then my insight and breakthrough was when I realized that I'm also trying to change people out there. And so to really look inside at my own assumptions and work on my own consciousness and challenge that and change my way of being in relation. And, in the aftermath, there's so many courageous people that have come up to really do research on the inner dimensions and bringing that in there. So I think everyone's on their own path and to let that arise. But I really see a shift now where transformation is the starting point, and it's the focus of a big international assessment. So, but it was my own learning that I think was my transformation.
Well, it makes me hopeful when you say you're seeing progress, because science wouldn't usually be the area you'd expect to see progress and transformation, right? So that's really encouraging. And I think for a lot of women, there's something inside, a frustration inside that turns into their passion. They convert it somehow into the passion with which they work. Sister Jayanti, a story.
Yeah, thank you, Judy, and thank you to my sisters for the very powerful stories that each one of you has shared. And yes, my life has been very much based on the subject of inner transformation through consciousness, but maybe the most recent one that had a sort of major impact in different ways was when the Brahma Kumaris took on this role of being observers at the climate change conferences in 2009. And we took up the theme of consciousness and climate change. And today, of course, it's called climate emergency. It's not even just a crisis, but it's an emergency. But at that time, it was still called climate change. And my own understanding of that was that it was so important to recognize that our thoughts are important in terms of what we're doing in the world out there. And unless we come back to that inner awareness of finding the happiness that we need within, while we are still seeking happiness from things outside within a consumer society, we're never going to be able to deal with climate change. And so we started with the subject of consciousness and climate change at that time in Copenhagen. And people were surprised, but they responded well. And over the years, I've seen how this has become more and more of a theme that many other groups attending these conferences have taken up. And in one case, it was beautiful to see UNESCO having a stand at one of these conferences, and I think it was the one in Bonn. And their slogan outside their stand said, "Changing minds, not climate." And I thought, something has gone somewhere and reached a position where others can see it at a UNESCO stand. So that was a moment when I felt, just keep going with whatever you believe in. And someone somewhere is going to wake up and carry that message forward. And unfortunately, we see that through COVID times, there was a simplicity that came into our behavior, but it was so temporary. And it's like the pandemic hasn't completely gone, but things are gradually coming back to the usual way of business and life. I won't say normal, but just the usual. But yet, it's very sad that the whole dependency on fossil fuels has again come back in a big way. And of course, we are seeing the Ukraine story and fossil fuels and the connection there. So my hope is that when people really begin to understand that it's the inner consciousness and the change within myself that can make a difference to what's going on outside, that then, yes, we can get back to some sort of relationship of respect and harmony with nature. And of course, that's what it's all about. And for me, the click that came to me when we started with climate change conferences was this, that our relationship with nature is absolutely vital. And while we just treat nature as an object that has to be exploited and just consumed, we're going to go further and further downhill rather than begin to bring about change. Thank you.
Very thoughtful from all of you. Thank you. You all, in this moment, I'm asking you to reflect, and we're here in kind of a reflective space, but I know when you're on the field, there's moments where you must feel indignant, offended, misunderstood, talked over, whatever. And because I know when I talked with you all before last week that there were moments like that in your experience. And because you're in positions of leadership, your inner state, your mood almost certainly affects those you're working with, your teams, your other people. So I'm wondering, when you're feeling challenged, what are you trying to maintain inside? What are you trying to, what state are you trying to maintain inside, and how do you get there? And let's start with Spangili.
It's such a hard question, because working as a global leader for people living with HIV in all their diversity means that it's such a high responsibility, and the importance of listening, and the importance of being challenged, and the importance of also, one of the biggest critiques we got currently, one of the biggest critique I got recently was when we had to respond to the war in Ukraine. And we said, we need to make sure that people living with HIV are okay and they still get their treatment. And we understand that, the women and the children are going to be at high risk. And the biggest critique that came to me was, there's so many wars happening in your own continent, and you did not respond in the same way. And in that moment, when you get critiqued in the most precious thing that you hold so close to you. And it's so easy for you, like it was so easy for me to just wanting to defend. But I think one of the things I've learned to do is to be a person when you're in that position, is a person of understanding that listening is so important.
Right.
And exercising compassion to every aspect of whatever voices that are coming. But to do that,
even the voices that are criticizing you,
even the voice that are criticizing, to hold that compassion. But for you to actually hold that compassion means that there's some things that you must do as yourself. And one of the things that I've learned, and I was fortunate enough that I did start my journey as a young girl of searching for myself at the Brahma Kumaris, and that I learned that meditation is such a powerful tool, and that you had to make time, because it'll save you in moments like these, because it's such a great tool of understanding yourself, of understanding intuition, of understanding that there's a deeper power and a deeper vision. And for me, therefore, is every day understanding that I can't start my day without having moments of reflection, of having moments of how do I deepen my understanding, and how do I deepen my listening, but also how do I deepen my compassion. And therefore, I think for me, that's how I've managed to be able to deal with that, to deal with the noise, is understanding that you have to create space and time for you to just take in the energy, because it is big work. It is a big responsibility to carry so much and to lead. So on my side, it's creating those mechanisms. And for me, it has been the meditation really, but also connecting with other leaders. And actually the biggest theme currently right now as a leader that I'm practicing is understanding compassion and collaboration.
Okay. And what you're saying is it's not just in the moment, that if you wait till the moment, it's too late. I think what you're saying is you start in the morning, and you start every morning. And then when the moment comes, you're better able. I mean, because when someone's calling you out, you have to have a lot of composure, right?
I think Judy, in a society where there's constant crisis. Whether it's crisis between relationships, your own relationship, we are in constant crisis mode. Right. And therefore, even COVID showed us that we are in constant crisis. We live in such a moment where there's so much uncertainty.
Right.
And really, it's so important to create moments that can actually help you to be able to respond to that crisis, to respond to that uncertainty. Right. And there's no other tool that, for me, that I found that was so effective than to actually create, I call it a spiritual ritual, that is so important. And somebody who grows up also in African spirituality, I found that that's the one tool that cuts across everywhere. So
That's beautiful. Thank you, Spongile. So Lisa, when we talked, you talked about listening. I think you brought that up. Do you want to say a little more about that? What happens when the Taliban is telling you their position on women or whatever?
Yeah, I think in every line of work, including mine, you're being criticized or challenged in your approaches. And the first and foremost I do is always expressing appreciation for the openness, for people to come forth, for opening up to me, to my colleagues. I think that's a very important step in a communication conversation, in establishing dialogue, appreciating honesty, and also, I think, showing vulnerability in a way. I do appreciate and seek collectively to reframe whatever we do, to move forward and co-create together. I think there are always ways to address differences of views, differences of approaching challenges. And so I listen with gratitude but also great humility, because I just don't know sometimes. Being aware that there are different worldviews out there doesn't mean I necessarily always understand them immediately. So listening to me is really a tool that I try to practice every day, in every circumstances. And I always learn more about the art, what I call the art of listening, the art of really understanding ourselves.
Are there ever moments when you are feeling where your humility is hard to locate and you're really wanting to, you're feeling strongly about what's being said and you have to either take a break or something? I mean, is there ever a moment where, even in spite of your practice and in spite of your best intentions, that what you're hearing is pushing on you in some way? Do you have a remedy for that, or you don't experience that?
Oh yeah, of course I experience that. Of course, yes.
Do in that moment?
I just think sometimes if you push back too hard, you might just close doors you've just opened up. And I think being very conscious of the fact that you want to make a difference and want to act, but you can't. If you're too harsh in your response, that doesn't mean that I'm not passionate about, especially women's rights, and especially in the context I work. I have given the example of Pakistan. I have many more examples, of course, in the context of my current work in Afghanistan. But I try to approach it with calm. That will hopefully open up opportunities to find a better way than confrontation. Okay.
So you look at the long view and you make your choice, and if necessary, you go for a swim, right?
I love that.
All right, I want to switch my question up, and I want to ask Karen, and then I'm going to go to Sister Jayanti. Karen, you have spoken a bit about the power of the collective in bringing about important change. And there's always a bit of a balance, right? We're talking about individual leadership and women leading change, but we're also, women don't do it alone, leaders don't do it alone, right? No matter how great the leader, Nelson Mandela, or you pick your great leader, there's always a relationship between the individual and the collective. So what do you do to galvanize communities or inspire communities, groups of people, to move towards a shared purpose or a shared image? What's the move from the individual to the collective? How is that done? How do you do it?
Well, for me, I think that's a great question, because a lot of people right now with climate change and global issues in general feel like they don't really matter. Like, I'm just one little drop in the ocean, and if I do this, then it's not changing anything in terms of systems. And so looking at paradigms, or the thought patterns, or how we actually see ourselves in relation to the world, I think is really important. And I've really challenged, I've pulled on an area of research called quantum social science that is really looking at language and meaning and shared context and values, and how that creates an entanglement from the very deep space of oneness. And it brings in consciousness, it brings in these things in. So it's really challenging that very individualistic, deterministic, reductionist worldview, and saying, wait a minute, science itself is telling us that there's a different reality out there. And that also has implications for our social reality. And I think we're truly underestimating our collective capacity for social change by just thinking of ourselves as like the metaphor of atoms rather than as waves of potential. So to me, it's just and it pushes people to wait, what are you saying? And then thinking about that and seeing that, we're always the collective. We are the system. So
is there openness? Is there openness to that? Especially you're working in academic settings, and I spent a little time in those settings. I don't find them always so open. So what's your experience when you propose you don't reject the science, but you open it up to a wider proposition? How much receptivity, and how do you get openness? What do you do to win hearts or whatever, or minds or whatever?
Yeah, it's a greest question, because physical sciences will say, please do not put social and quantum together. And the social scientists will say, we don't need physical science to explain the social world. So you're kind of stuck. But I've just found that, like, by presenting it in a very logical way, and just through like rigorous research, building on like Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed, and there is so much in the environmental humanities and social sciences that is really saying the same thing. So languaging it in a way that people can grasp onto, and just as an inquiry rather than this is the way it is, but just to keep asking questions: why beliefs matter, why paradigms matter, why consciousness matters, why metaphors matter, and just kind of walking, and this is like my own ongoing inquiry too, because I think sometimes I feel like, oh, I don't matter, it's like these problems are too big. But just to like open up a different conversation, and even if people don't agree with it, you can at least start and say, well, quantum decision making is actually much better at predicting behaviors because it allows for context and preference reversals and things. So, it's just I think a fresh way of getting people to really challenge like what the way that we relate to the world. And I think of climate change, as we've heard from Lisa and really, that it's a relationship problem. It's how we relate to ourselves, to each other, and to the future.
Okay, yeah. So you speak with them in the language they understand, and then you bring them to the collective. Sister Jayanti, so what about this business of the move from individual, an individual knowing what needs to happen or feeling what needs to happen, to moving to the power of the collective? What's important in that?
It's very, very important to recognize that I have to change. And when I begin to do that, then there's an impact on others around me, whether I like it or not, whether it's my positive change or a negative change, there's an impact. And if I'm very consciously thinking about positive transformation, then there's a very beautiful impact you see, even with people who don't agree with you. But at some point, even if they don't agree, they'll respect you for what it is you're doing yourself. But of course, when many others begin to change and move in the same direction, then it's much easier for the thing to move, for any idea to move forward. I heard this idea that, and it's a reality, not just an idea, but if you've got a tray of water and you want to freeze it, it's not that individual molecules begin to freeze. It's like at first it's a few here, a few here, a few here. But at some point, when there's enough few molecules, the whole tray freezes. And so to me, it's a representation of the situation where at the moment, there's little clusters of people dotted around the world who, like Spongili mentioned beautifully about meditation, like Karen and Lisa also refer to things that need to happen within. And so this idea that inner change is going to bring about transformation in the systems of the world and the way that we operate within the world, I'm finding that this is becoming an idea that is taking root in people's hearts and minds. And I think it's going to be a beautiful surprise for us to see that it's become not just a minority idea, but a majority idea. I'm thinking about how meditation was unknown in the West in the 60s. And then a little band of people, 4 of them musicians, going to India and bringing back those ideas, and meditation began to spread. And when I came back to London after my own transformation, was about that time also, it was very interesting because people loved Hatha Yoga, but they didn't know about Raj Yoga, about the meditation side. And today, most people would know that there's the side of Hatha Yoga, the physical expression, but there's also the inner side. And they might not know the word Raja, or they know the word yoga, but they understand there's a spiritual dimension to that also. And so I do see that it's a reality, and I'm seeing how it's happening across the world. And of course, I know that ultimately it's only through change of consciousness that we can impact all the big issues that the world is facing today. It's not going to be by fiddling around and trying to do this, trying to do that, but it's when human hearts and minds change and we move in the same direction as one family, then we're going to be able to tackle whatever it is that's needed, and we can create a better world together. I hold that vision very deep in my heart. And when I see challenges coming my way from either it's inside the organization or inside myself or outside in the world out there, I say, it's okay. You know, the light is coming and the light is going to take over, and there will be light in the world. I can't give you a date, but I know it's going to happen, definitely.
I love that. And so special thanks to our brothers, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, for getting the receptivity of the whole idea. Okay, so I want to put a pause on our conversation, and I want to invite in two special young women. I want to start with Kushi. And Kushi, I think you're in Holland, and I think that let's see if they get you highlighted here so that I can invite you to ask a question. Welcome, Kushi. Kushi is 16, I think, and I think she had to get out of school in order to join the conversation this morning or this afternoon. And so, Kushi, do you have a question for either one of the panelists or all of them, or your own reflection? What would you like to share?
So thank you, Judy. I would like to ask a question to Sister Jayanti.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, today's world is all about materialism, like money, power, status, or the way you look. So how can I, as a woman, lead in a more spiritual way and make an impact?
Wonderful question, Kushi. And I really think that the world is ready for women to take on a spiritual role. I know that when our seniors, we call them daddies, the elders, the women, when they started, there was quite a big resistance to that. But in recent times, I've seen that people appreciate the perspective of spiritual input from women. And I think that you just have to be very true to who you are as a spiritual being and allow that to flourish within yourself. And then not just what you say, but who you are and what you do is going to make an impact on others around you.
So let me thank you, Kushi, and let me invite in Maria Paula. I believe she's in Bogota, and hopefully she can come on and join us. There you are, Maria Paula, welcome. Maria Paula is in her 20s. She lives in Bogota, and we've asked her if she would join and ask a question of whomever. Maria Paula.
Yes, thank you, Judy, and hello to everyone. So I've been really inspired of what all of you have been sharing. And so for Karen or Svangili or Lisa or Sister Jayanti, I would like to know what kind of consciousness in a more specific way should we develop in order to let go or go beyond that frustration that you were talking about, perhaps about sexist comments or words or attitudes, or the simple fact that we are seeing that the world is going slow, that is going, that is perhaps stagnant, not stuck in the positive transformation that we want to see. So what kind of consciousness should we practice more? Thank you.
Okay, that's a very big question. So who would like to take that question? She offered it to all of you. So anyone? Svangili.
Yeah. So firstly, I'd like to say, Maria, that I do believe that the world is in a transformation. So the world, there's so many things that are moving in the world, and I have such a positive outlook lately, because even as we start, right, but our nature as human beings is to transform and to move. And therefore, in every part of the world, there's a movement, there's always movement to actually create a better world for all of us. And that's why we are here. That's why a global network of people living with HIV exists, because what we want is for people that are often marginalized to have a quality life. And we've seen the transformation that happens in that. And for us to actually hold that, for me, is I'm going to refer to an author that I really love, who has actually, Karen, used academia to study love, the concept of love, and that is Bell Hooks. And for Bell Hooks writes about love because she wanted specifically like Black people to understand the concept of love in bringing about transformation, love for themselves, love for the world, and love for transformation. And therefore, I think when, and realizing how much all the work that we do starts with the consciousness of love. And that from, again, going back to what Sister Jayanti was talking about, the self, right? So loving the self, but also loving others and also loving the world. And Bell Hooks writes so beautifully about it. And for me, that's the consciousness that I currently hold when we talk about changing and doing social change work. So yeah.
So consciousness of love, Lisa.
Yeah, thanks so much for this really beautiful question. And I'm feeling so inspired also by what Karen and Ungile and Sister Jayanti have said. And I think for me, consciousness and exercise of consciousness is really two things. And without that, I think we can't reach that higher level that we need to reach to explore our leadership potential as a woman. And one is to be actually quite courageous to look into ourselves. It can be sometimes painful to realize what's inside, but I think that's a very first step, being conscious of our own perceptions. And again and again and again, practice mindfulness. It's an exercise. It never stops. And second, really giving that space to the other. It's so hard. We've probably all have done exercises where we just recently in my mediation practice, thinking about a name that we've never heard. What connotations, what perceptions, what preconceived biases do we have in our mind? Having met the person, that changes. And I think giving space to the other and being humble, being open-minded, being patient to let the other express him or herself. So that's for me what I call dual concept of consciousness.
Very nice. Yeah, Karen.
Yeah, I think those are wonderful. And also, like, for me, when, like, I have a tendency to others also, and just to stand in a space of oneness and integrity, not just for myself, but for everyone, to think of the biggest, the values that apply to the whole system. To me, that's the quality of consciousness that I seek to practice, and it's often through meditation, but also just awareness in the moment to see, like, here I go again. And I feel like, yeah, that practice is what is so essential to being aware of consciousness.
Okay, Maria Paula. Oh, Sister Jayanti, yeah.
I hesitate before I say this, but I'd like to say it. And I think that one of the things that's important about consciousness is to be able to be aware of the presence of the divine, the connection with the source, because where is it that I get my power from? Where is it that I learn to deal with my ego and come back to humility? How do I increase my compassion? All of these things for me come when there is that awareness of the connection with the divine. And I know that 80% of the world holds some idea of spirituality and God. But yet the 20% are so loud and so strong that it feels as if, God's been really pushed to the sidelines. And I just like to bring this idea of Shakti, the woman that has this empowerment that comes from Shiva, the supreme, the divine. And so to take that awareness of consciousness and use it in my life is very valuable. Thank you.
Okay, so arrange, Maria Paula. Is that good? Work for you? Okay, there's an invitation to those who are on Zoom, and we have a question here. Penny asks, so what's wrong with confrontation? What do you fear about conflict and difference? I mean, there's a presumption there. Maybe you don't fear conflict and difference, but that's the question. Spangilia, did you want to take this one?
Yes. So Penny, I think on my side, I work in such spaces of conflict and confrontation because you can't advocate and not confront. It's one of the first the first thing about advocating for social change is confronting and understanding that there's going to be conflict. And I think as all the speakers, I think we're trying to look at what does confrontation look like now, right? And throughout like as time has moved on, 2022, advocating and confrontation on my side looks differently because we understand that social change is a collective, right? And there's no protagonist and antagonist. And firstly, as previously in activism, there was these powerful governments, which we still portray as these big businesses. For instance, with the COVID-19 vaccine, when I got involved with that work, what we were facing was a big pharma and the inequality and inequity around the vaccine distribution. And we had to understand that confronting this is going to look differently, because what we are looking at now is how do we look at confrontation from a progressive lens? Instead of saying, you are the wrong ones, you are doing this, but how do we say, okay, so what do we have in a system? And who has what power in a system? And how do we then collectively ask those with power in a more, I think Lisa said this, like, how do you reach people in their own understanding? So that when you confront, you're confronting from a space of compassion, you're also confronting from a space of evidence, because of how they would hear what you're trying to advocate for. For instance, when you're trying to speak to government, when we're trying to speak to big businesses, one of the things we've understood as activists is the importance of evidence and the importance of people's experiences and the importance of people's stories. And therefore, what we then do, instead of going and saying, you are doing this and this and this and confronting in those ways, what we have done is understanding that how do we capacitate ourselves to understanding how do we get that big evidence to say, this is why we need it, this is why it's important, and then use stories and use people's stories, especially because we understand how stories are so important in transforming the world. And therefore, so confrontation, I don't think we fear confrontation, but I think what in this, as the speakers, what we are looking at is how do we view confrontation differently so that we transform the world, you know what I mean? And so we are confronting, and even in this moment when we are talking, I think we are trying to confront the dominant understanding of transformation, and we are saying how do we in different perspectives and different fields come together to confront that conflict of understanding transformation. So yeah, on my side is we are confronting, but confrontation looks differently now.
And translators, are you doing okay? Because we're talking a little fast, so hopefully the translators are keeping up. I want to ask a follow-up question to this one about confrontation, and that has to do with flexibility. And Karen, I think you may have weighed in on this when we were talking. So there's a bit of a delicate balance so one is confrontation, but one is when we're working on transformation around sensitive subjects, how do we know when to be flexible and when to draw a firm line? Karen, I'm tossing that one to you, and anyone else can weigh in.
That's an excellent question, because I think, we tend to think like this is the right way and this is what we need to do. And it's very clear from science, everything. But I think that like getting around those conversations in our head of right and wrong, or that we're always trying to find the fault with the others, and going to what Lisa, called like the deep listening, saying like, what is the commitment here? How do we align and move the conversation in a different direction? And so I think that it's how we deal with those, like confronting the conflicts, and many of the issues we're talking about are value conflicts right now, and whose values count in defining the future, whose voice is not being heard and whose is being heard. And that's why I think there's a lot of hope in new voices coming out. So yeah, I think that's what.
So what's up? Yeah, Sister Jayanti.
I loved your definitions, Pangili, of changing the way we see confrontation and how we deal with it today. But yes, I also agree with Karen. When it's a question of my inner core values and also my principles that I hold dear and I want to observe them, then whether it's going to be confrontation and how I deal with that, or whether it's going to be actual conflict, it might even come to that, but I need to have the courage to be able to face that. But there are so many other things that happen in life on a day-to-day basis that aren't the question of my deep core values or my principles, more they're a personal choice. And so if it's a question of personal choice, can I have the humility to say, okay, why not? Let's try it your way, rather than get stuck and say, no, it has to be like this. And so I think that fine line for me is where if it's value-based, if it's principle-based, then I have to have the courage to stand up for that, whether it's confrontation or conflict. But the other side where I can adjust and be flexible, let me have that space in my heart and generosity of spirit to say, why not? Let's do it the way you want.
Okay, interesting. So we've got another one here. I want to make sure I'm understanding the question. I'll give it to you, and if I don't understand it, you can understand it. How to differentiate between what is really me and what not, so that I can get back to what I really am. How to differentiate between what is really me and what not, so that I can get back to what I really am. And as an aspect, this is on the process of transformation. So I'm not sure I fully understand the intention here, but maybe you do. So let me just offer it to you, and you can answer it, any one of you, however it strikes you. Do you need the, yep, Lisa, take a run at it.
Yeah, I think it takes me back to the deep listening, and it's what is in me may take time to understand. It takes conscientious effort to listen to your core. And in my case, where I'm working across the continent in so many different contexts, it does mean that I do have continuously to challenge my perceptions and question the value systems that I've grown up with, that are mine. I think it is about openness and being vulnerable also to the sometimes painful questions that you ask yourself. And through this process of self-reflection, and as Sister Jayanti said, connecting with the divine, you will get greater clarity. It needs to be a continuous practice. Yeah, that's my take on
It does take courage, doesn't it? That look inside to see, where do I really stand? Are there biases here that I'm living with? Anyone else want to answer this before I've got another question for you, but if anyone else has a take on this one? Yes, Sister Jayanti.
Just to say that I agree completely with Lisa that it's going to take time, and it's a journey inside to go deeper and deeper. And it's not easy to know the self, because when I started my spiritual journey, I was 19, but I look back and I say, how much did I know of myself? And I'd say it was only this much, really. And today, maybe there's still surprises ahead. Probably there are. But yes, I think I know myself a lot more. And I'm also more comfortable with who I am and what I am. So it is a regular practice of introspection and silence and the connection with the divine that opens up that door and helps you know more and more deeply.
Okay, I have a question for you. So today we're focused on the role of women in transformation, and there is a kind of sisterhood to that, right? But I'm curious about the roles of men in your lives. To what degree have men been partners and mentors for you? And the reason I'm asking this question is that men hold most the positions of authority in most structures, right? In our Supreme Courts and our corporations and our governments, etc. So if no man ever held a door open for us, I'm not sure where we'd be. So I'm just curious, in your own lives, I'd love to hear from you, what role have men played? And if you want to add on to that and what role you'd like them to play, feel free. So whoever wants to take the question. Lisa.
Maybe. Certainly men have played an enormous role. And I started my family with my father, who's always been of wonderful support till today, and encouragement and challenge, which I appreciated. And I think having that from childhood on it's really shaped me who I am. I now have a wonderful partner who supports me in whatever I do. He challenges me. He asks tough questions sometimes, which I appreciate. But it's this, I think, feeling of being supported. No matter what you do, you will receive their love. That has helped me a lot. And colleagues who have accompanied me in my career, male colleagues. So yes, men have played a tremendous role in my life.
Thank you. Yes. Karen.
Yeah, I've had the fortune of being mentored by many wonderful women. And what I see now, though, is that like men are like kind of looking in on the side. And I think that we're creating a space for them to come forward and engage with more courage. And I think that in some ways it is that women are leading the way and creating a path for men to be more open about the role of emotions and consciousness and just even grief around some of the issues that are happening today. So I think it's really an exciting time.
That's an interesting take, yeah. Gives men, especially there are a lot of sensitive men, but maybe they don't feel they have a space to express that sometimes. That's nice. Yes. Swangili, Sister Jayanti, go ahead.
Swangili, if you'd like to, that's fine.
Okay. So I battle with this question. I really do, because, yeah, and this is based on a history of just feeling, and I'm just going to be quite honest, that having come from a very marginalized and experiencing discrimination, and if I mean, like, even the theory and the evidence points out that Black women women of color have always been like at the end of the spectrum in terms of like all sorts of like discrimination. And therefore men, for me, even growing up in quite a world where I was protected by women, were such a big, like there was such a big trauma and a big trigger that I've never felt safe around men for a longest time. And I found myself in movements and spaces where I felt so safe around women. And however, I think gradually, just recently, trying to understand the role of men, because you're quite right. I think for a longest time I was angry at men. And I can express that I was really, really angry at men, that even in South Africa, there's such a collective anger towards men, because there's even like, I mean, Pratibha will tell you, there's on mainstream media, there's a campaign where it actually tries to trash men, you know, as a collective. And so I've moved around, you know, even with my brother, even with my own father, even with my own uncles, kind of like always reminding them the position that they hold. And I realized over the years how bitter that was. And also then it diminishes their role in the work that we do. And also it doesn't give space. Instead, one time actually, we invited men to a meeting about women, about gender-based violence and also sexual harassment. And we wanted to sensitize men, but we actually ended up confronting them. And that day, I realized men left the room, all of them. And when I went to go speak to them, because I was organizing that meeting, they said, we feel unheard. We feel that you have collectively put us in a basket. And therefore, we actually now want to be that you call us. And so therefore, it really, really shifted my understanding of the role of men. Because for me, it was, we just need to transform the world and make sure that men are not and are not in our new world. And that's impossible, right? Because there's such an importance around masculine energy, right? And the role of men. Mm-hmm. And we can't change where the society we live in, that they still hold higher positions, and they have the highest influence. And from there, and then I started shifting in, and I understand now men can actually, so I asked men to be more of allies, that when men are in the spaces where they hold a position of power, to always understand that power dynamic that is at play, and to just give space for women to also contribute. Also at times to also understand that when there's a room, when there's an opportunity for influence and there's a room full of men, to be just aware that there is a voice that's missing. And for me, just been constantly doing that, but also just asking, I think we've overly relied on ourselves in understanding on how to transform our own issues. And we've never given voice to men to say, so how do we do it? And that has been the biggest disadvantage in like feminist movements. And therefore just opening up that space to like have conversations with men, and also then conscientize men around, you know, what does it mean for women to lead? And what do women contribute? And and I guess, you know, lately everybody is exploring the whole thing around gender fluidity, that even as women and as men, we hold the same energy when it comes to performance, when it comes to thinking. And therefore, how do we share that instead of isolating ourselves and thinking men are this way and women are this way? I think there's a big collective like shift where we understand that energy is quite a fluid thing. And therefore that just because men are socially constructed to believe that they're strong, that's no longer the case. And I think there's a big shift. And for me, that has been that has transformed me to understanding that men, as much as they've been given that, they have been given, it's not that they are. And therefore, how do we share that space? And therefore, I'm continuously asking of men of how do we share leadership? And right now I'm co-directing with a man, and it's been so incredible to actually see that partnership of how that like both our energies leading a global movement. So yeah,
that's promising. Sister Jayanti, instead of having you answer that, since we're up against time, I'm going to have you answer the following question. I have one question for everyone as a closing question, and then we'll end our part. And so the question is, and to those whose questions we didn't get to, sorry, we'll close with this question. Is there something about this time that offers an opening for women to lead? Describe it as you see it. So, Sister Jayanti, let's start with you.
I'm seeing that so many of the structures that have been created within the whole system of the paternal society, those structures are falling apart. And so it is a time in which there's, in a sense, a vacuum. And I think women taking that power from the divine and playing that role of that Shiv Shakti, that embodiment of God's power, can do something quite amazing and open the door for everyone, not just men or women, but men and women, to take on a different consciousness and do something differently. The way that we've done things before has resulted in the state of the world that it is now in. And really, you can't get worse than it is at the moment. That's my feeling when I see and read about what's going on, or I hear the personal stories of people. It really is, in a sense, the end of the line. It has to go through a major, major shift. And of course, the shift happens in here first, and that is happening. But I think that it's women who are now stepping into that role of emerging that spiritual power so that then they can open the door for everyone. And I do see that a better world is a world of that perfect balance of men and women together, holding up the sky together. In China, they say, well, the sky is held up half by women and the other half also, of course, important. And so I think that it is a very special time. And I think we do have that capacity to be able to make a difference and to bring about change in the way in which we are thinking and feeling and being, and whatever it is we do, to do it with a different consciousness. And that's going to make the difference. So it is a special time.
Thank you. Lisa, is there a special opportunity at this time? Something about this time that offers an opening for women to lead?
Yeah, I think, as Sister Jayanti said, there's really an emergency and urgency to the current situation we find ourselves in. And I think after all these years and times, we should have realized that only together, jointly, we can make a difference. And it is not that half of the world's population can do it. No, it's only through a joint effort. And I do feel that both men and women do bring special talents and abilities that both need to be harnessed in order to move forward. So if not now, then when? So, and I think with every context, every country, every situation being different, we just need to find the key for each and every situation to unlock that very potential at this very moment.
Thank you. If not now, when? Karen.
Yeah, I think that this moment really, it's not that it's an opening for women, but women are actually like taking the space, they're speaking out, and they're recognizing that it's not just having agency that matters, but it's the quality of agency that we bring to not just being, responding to the problems, but realizing our potential then for collective change. And I think there's that qualitative difference is going to make all the difference in the world, how we move forward.
Beautiful. Thank you. Spangili?
I agree with everyone. And I do believe it's always like, it's not just this time, it's always been, right? It's that it's just been not, the space is not yet, the space did not allow women to lead. But I think my biggest message is that as we take up leadership as women, to also understand that just going back to what I said earlier on, to not polarize our leadership, and to not do the same mistakes that we did where men were leading and it became a boys' club, you know, and we're still seeing it even in the global institutions. I mean, I attend quite a lot of like global institutions meetings where you get there and you are the only woman. And therefore, as we think about our leadership, as we think about moving leadership to more women, for me, it's let's not do the same mistakes. How do we make sure that we collectively, both men and women, are leading? But also to understand that leadership sometimes, even in moments when we are not given that opportunity, but we are leading. And sometimes it's actually sitting at the back and leading at the back, you know, that we must never forget that's also leadership when we are not given the space to lead in the forefront, but given the space at the back, because there's generally men do listen to women, and we must use those moments when we are given a chance to lead from the back. So on my side, it's always been, there's never a time that we are not meant to lead. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So Lisa, Karen, Spangili, Sister Jayanti, and everyone who stayed with us today and joined us, thank you very much. It's been very rich. And now I'll turn it over to the team.
Thank you, Judy. And so now that we've had this very enriching, inspiring, and reflective conversation, let us now move into our own inner reflection. So I'm going to ask everyone, I don't know if anyone was taking notes, but just to put your pen, your paper down, to sit quietly, to sit comfortably. And I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath in and breathe out. Take another deep breath in and breathe out. I'm going to share some words with you, and I invite you to follow along. In a little reflection, some would call it meditation. I like to call it our journey inwards. You can keep your eyes closed if that's comfortable for you, but we invite you to keep your eyes slightly open, just to bring your awareness to the present moment. And I invite you to imagine that you're looking in a mirror. You see your face, your hair, your nose, your mouth, your ears. And slowly your attention is drawn to the center of your forehead, where a tiny sparkle of light starts to shine. and all you see is that sparkle. The bright, tiny light. Just as when a boat is sailing in the water, when it's dark or stormy, there's a lighthouse that shines its bright light from a distance. So the boat knows which direction to go in. That lighthouse is each one of us. That lighthouse is me. I am a being of peace. I spread rays of peace all around me. I am a being of compassion. I spread rays of compassion all around me. I'm a being of generosity, spreading rays of generosity all around me. I'm a being of respect and harmony. I spread rays of respect and harmony. I'm a being of power. I spread rays of power all around me. This lighthouse that I am within, this awareness will bring change in the world. Let me sit quietly for a moment and reflect. Om Shanti. I am a being of peace.
Thank you, Nilisha, for taking us on that very wonderful inner journey. And this brings us to the close of today's event. We thank each and every one of you for being here today, sharing your presence and your input. And of course, all the panelists filling our hearts with gratitude and power so that we can go forward and play this role even better as a leader, not just for ourselves, but for all those around us. And the program wouldn't be complete if we did not share a token of love with all of you, a takeaway gift. These are some powerful words by one of the many powerful women in our life, Daddy Jayanti, a former head of the Brahma Kumaris. And Daddy means an elder sister. And Daddy told us the ability to live according to your values in an unwavering way depends on how well you have understood your spiritual identity. Cultivating that inner state of dignity is the basis of spiritual power. And it is this power that is most needed in the world today. So this is our takeaway gift for all of you. Wishing you all well. And lastly, we want to offer you a toolkit in which there will be, there are many links here to various types of meditations and other resources. And in the chat, I've entered the Google link, Google Drive link, so you can access that those various meditations, which we hope will support you on your journey. And lastly, if there is anyone who would like to stay in touch with us and for further conversations like we've had today, we encourage you to write your name and email address in the chat, and then we will stay in touch with you. So once again, a big, big thank you to all of you, and especially, of course, to our panelists and to Judy. Take care. We also encourage you, if you wish, you can unmute. We also ask if you would like to wish anyone Happy Women's Day or Happy CSW, whatever you're welcome to unmute also and do that.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Women's Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.
Lovely to be with everyone.
Happy Women's Day. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Many
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Lovely program.
Good.
Hi, Julia.
Hi.
Thank you very much.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.